The abandoned island of dolls. Mexico's most haunted mystery. The island that time forgot. Deep within the tangled canals of Xochimilco, just south of Mexico City, lies an island unlike any other on Earth. Hidden behind a curtain of trees and water plants, the place looks like a forgotten nightmare. Hundreds of dolls hang from branches, nailed to walls, or suspended by strings, their faces cracked, their eyes faded, and their bodies slowly decaying under the relentless sun. Some are missing limbs. Others stare blankly, as if watching every visitor who dares to approach. Locals call it La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls. For decades, stories have circulated about this eerie island. Some say the dolls move at night. Others claim to hear whispers echoing across the water, soft voices that call out names or laugh faintly in the dark. Fishermen refuse to pass too close after sunset, and even the bravest locals speak of the place in hushed tones. But behind this chilling legend lies a true story, one that begins not with evil, but with tragedy. The drowning girl. In the 1950s, the island was home to a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera, a quiet, solitary man who had chosen to live away from the bustling city. He tended to a small garden, grew vegetables, and used a boat to trade with nearby villagers. To him, the island was a place of peace and isolation, until one day, everything changed. According to Don Julian's account, a young girl drowned in the canal near his home. He said he found her lifeless body floating among the lilies, her eyes open but empty, her small hand tangled in the roots below the surface. The event shook him deeply. He felt helpless, haunted by the thought that he couldn't save her. A few days later, as the story goes, Don Julian found a doll floating in the same waters, believed to belong to the drowned girl. He picked it up and hung it on a tree near his hut, as a sign of respect and perhaps as a way to honor her lost spirit. But that was only the beginning. From that day onward, strange things began to happen around the island. Don Julian claimed he heard whispers, the sound of footsteps when no one was there, and the soft laughter of a child echoing over the water. Terrified and desperate to calm the spirit, he started hanging more dolls, one after another, from trees, fences, and posts. Over the years, hundreds of them covered the island. Some he found drifting in the canals. Others were given to him by visitors who heard his story. The island slowly transformed from a peaceful retreat into a chilling shrine, a place where dolls hung like silent guardians, watching over the water where the girl had died. The whispers in the night. As the years passed, Don Julian's isolation deepened. He rarely visited the mainland, choosing instead to live among the dolls, his silent companions. The villagers thought he was losing his mind, but Don Julian insisted that what he was doing was not madness, it was protection. He believed the drowned girl's spirit still roamed the island, restless and unsatisfied. To keep her calm, he continued to collect dolls, each one representing a prayer, an offering, a plea for peace. At night, the canals of Xochimilco are eerily quiet. The sound of insects fills the air, and the faint splash of water echoes through the reeds. Don Julian often said that during those nights, he heard voices, the voice of a young girl calling his name, asking for a doll. Sometimes he heard laughter, sometimes crying, and other times whispers so faint he could barely understand them. Visitors who came to the island after sunset described the same thing. They said the dolls seemed to move slightly in the wind, as if breathing. Their eyes, some missing, some half shut, reflected the dim light of lanterns, creating an illusion that they were watching. One man swore he saw a doll turn its head. Another claimed to hear it whisper, "Ven conmigo," come with me. Even the fishermen who traveled those waters avoided the island. They told stories of hearing songs, lullabies sung by invisible voices drifting across the canal. Some said they saw a shadow of a girl walking along the edge of the water, disappearing when approached. The whispers grew stronger the longer Don Julian stayed. He began to feel as if the dolls themselves carried the spirit's energy, each one a vessel, each one alive in its own way. He told the locals that the dolls spoke to him, warning him of danger, or telling him to hang more of them. Soon, the island wasn't home anymore. It was a living entity, breathing, watching, whispering. Don Julian no longer felt alone, but he also no longer felt free. The man who became the island. By the late 1960s, Don Julian Santana Barrera had become a legend in the region. To some, he was a holy man, a guardian of spirits. To others, he was a mad recluse who had surrendered his sanity to the whispers of the dead. But to Don Julian himself, he was simply a man chosen by fate to carry out a duty no one else would understand. He spoke less and less to the people who visited. When traders or curious travelers came to his island, they found him sitting among hundreds of dolls, many covered in mold and spider webs, their plastic faces weathered by sun and rain. The air smelled of rot and river water. The walls of his hut were lined with heads, torsos, and doll parts, some nailed to wood, others tied with string, dangling like lifeless charms. Each doll, he said, protected the island. He claimed they whispered secrets, warnings of things yet to come. Some he referred to by names, as if they were alive. This one, he once told a visitor, watches over the canal. She keeps the water calm. Another, hanging near the entrance, he said, guards the girl's spirit when she cries. The villagers from nearby San Pedro often brought him dolls in exchange for vegetables or herbs. He would accept them gladly, even when they were broken, burned, or missing limbs. He said damaged dolls were the most powerful because they had suffered, and the spirits understood suffering. At times, Don Julian was seen talking to the dolls as if they were old friends. He sang to them, washed their faces, or moved them from one tree to another, claiming they didn't like the spot. But over the years, his behavior grew darker. He started warning people not to stay too long. He told them the girl's spirit was growing angry, jealous of the living. He believed the dolls absorbed that anger, keeping it from harming others. Yet he confessed that at night, he could feel the energy of the island shift, as if hundreds of unseen eyes were fixed on him. Some nights, he said, he would wake suddenly, gasping for air, feeling a small hand pressing against his throat. He heard laughter near his bed, footsteps circling the hut, and the rustle of dolls brushing against each other when there was no wind. Locals began to fear him. They said the island had claimed him, that the man and the place were becoming one. The children of San Pedro were told never to go there. Even adults refused to cross the canal after sunset. The fishermen, once brave, began making detours around that stretch of water. They said they saw movement in the trees, shadows darting between the hanging dolls, and the faint reflection of a little girl staring at them from the water's surface. Still, Don Julian stayed. He no longer seemed to want to leave. In his mind, he was bound to the island, its keeper, its servant, and perhaps its prisoner. He once told his nephew, "The island speaks to me. I can't go. If I leave, something will happen." No one knew exactly what he meant, but years later, they would understand. Because the island that had given him purpose would soon take him too. The death of a caretaker. By the early 2000s, Don Julian was an old man. His face was weathered like the bark of the trees he had hung so many dolls upon. His hair had turned white, his back slightly bent, but his mind, though fragile, was still consumed by the same haunting devotion that had ruled his life for half a century. The island had become his entire world. He rarely left, except for short trips across the canal to visit his nephew, Anastasio, who lived nearby. During those visits, Don Julian often spoke about the girl's spirit as if she were still there beside him. He said she followed him, that she sometimes laughed when he tried to rest. Anastasio didn't believe him. He thought his uncle's loneliness had turned into obsession. But then came the strange conversations. In the weeks before his death, Don Julian began saying that the dolls were speaking louder. He told Anastasio that the drowned girl wanted him to join her, that she was calling him into the water. "She's waiting for me," he said. "Soon, I'll be with her. The dolls told me." Anastasio brushed it off as delusion, but Don Julian's eyes, though tired, carried a strange calmness, as if he had already accepted something inevitable. One morning in April 2001, Don Julian and Anastasio were working together near the canal, harvesting vegetables. The day was quiet, the water still. After a while, Anastasio left to tend to another area of the farm, leaving his uncle alone near the water's edge. When he returned a few hours later, he found Don Julian floating face down in the same canal where the little girl had drowned 50 years earlier. The water was calm, no sign of a struggle. The scene was eerily familiar, almost identical to the story that began the haunting decades before. Anastasio was struck with disbelief. He pulled his uncle's body to the shore, but it was too late. Don Julian Santana Barrera was gone. The villagers who heard the news said it was no accident. They believed the girl's spirit had finally claimed him, that the island had taken back its caretaker. Others whispered that Don Julian had willingly walked into the water, fulfilling a prophecy he had spoken about for years. In the days that followed, strange things continued to happen. Visitors said the dolls seemed to stare more intensely, as if mourning their master. Some swore they saw movement among the trees when no one else was around. Anastasio claimed he could hear his uncle's voice at night, calling across the water. "It's peaceful here," the voice would say. "The girl isn't angry anymore." The locals believed the island had gained another spirit that day, not just the girls, but Don Julian's as well. The man who had devoted his life to the haunted place had now become part of it. Two souls, bound by tragedy and isolation, forever linked beneath the surface of the same dark water. From that day forward, the Island of the Dolls was no longer just a place of superstition. It became a shrine. People from all over Mexico began visiting, not out of curiosity alone, but to pay respect to the man who had lived and died for a mystery no one could explain. The visitors and the curse. After Don Julian's death, the island he had guarded for so long was left alone once again. The wind carried the faint creak of the dolls as they swayed in the trees. Their glass eyes reflected the dim sunlight that filtered through the mangroves, and the water around the island seemed darker, thicker, almost heavier than before. At first, few people dared to go near. The locals believed Don Julian's spirit still lingered there, watching anyone who entered his sanctuary. But as word spread, curiosity began to outweigh fear. The story of La Isla de las Muñecas reached beyond Xochimilco, to Mexico City, and eventually to the world. Tourists came in small boats, guided by men who refused to dock for long. They came carrying cameras, flowers, and sometimes dolls, offerings to what they call the haunted island. But many who visited left unsettled. Some said their phones and cameras stopped working the moment they arrived. Others felt the air grow colder, even in the heat of midday. Several visitors described hearing faint whispers, like a child's laughter, just above the sound of the water. A few reported seeing dolls blink, their heads turning ever so slightly, as if following movement. One tourist, a woman from Guadalajara, said she felt something tug her hair when no one was behind her. Another, from Spain, claimed he heard a little girl's voice calling him by name, a name he had not spoken since childhood. When he turned, he saw a doll with its hand pointing toward the canal. The stories multiplied. People spoke of nightmares after visiting, dreams of drowning, of children crying, of hundreds of dolls staring from trees in the dark. Some claimed they brought dolls home from the island and soon experienced misfortune, sickness, lost jobs, broken relationships. When they returned the dolls, the strange events stopped. Locals began to say that taking anything from the island, even a small stick or a piece of fabric, would bring bad luck. They called it La Maldición de las Muñecas, the curse of the dolls. Fishermen continued to avoid it, even during the day. They swore the dolls' eyes followed their boats, and that the canal around the island seemed alive. One said he saw bubbles rising from the spot where Don Julian had died, though there was no current, no movement beneath. The government of Mexico eventually opened the island to guided tours, turning it into a strange mixture of legend and attraction. But even the guides, who tell the story daily, admit that the atmosphere changes unexpectedly. "You can feel when you're not welcome," one said. "The dolls are quiet at first. Then you start hearing things. That's when we leave." To this day, visitors leave behind dolls, not for fun, but as offerings. Some say it's to honor Don Julian. Others say it's to keep the spirit of the drowned girl calm. Every year, the number grows. Thousands of dolls now hang in every corner, their decaying faces merging with the trees, their bodies wrapped in vines. The island, once a lonely man's refuge, has become a living graveyard of plastic and silence, a place where grief, faith, and fear intertwine. And as the visitors leave, their boats slowly drifting away through the canals, many say the same thing. They can feel the island watching them, long after it disappears from sight. The investigations and the evidence. As stories of the island spread, it drew the attention not only of tourists but also of journalists, paranormal investigators, and curious researchers. Many came with cameras, recorders, and notebooks, determined to capture proof of the strange phenomena that surrounded La Isla de las Muñecas. Some investigations were simple, photographing the dolls, noting the number, and recording the environment. But others were more intense, aiming to capture what they believed could not be explained by nature. A group of paranormal investigators arrived with audio recorders, hoping to capture the voices the locals had described. During one night on the island, they reported hearing soft crying, barely audible like a child calling for help. The sound seemed to move from tree to tree, sometimes coming from above the water. Playback of the recordings revealed murmurs and whispers that the investigators insisted had not been produced by wind or wildlife. Others tried video documentation. They recorded the dolls swaying slightly in places where there was no breeze. Shadows appeared in corners of the hut and among the trees, shifting unnaturally. Some footage showed dolls seemingly changing positions between shots, a phenomenon the team could not explain. Anthropologists also visited, fascinated by the cultural and spiritual aspects of the island. They spoke with local elders, collecting oral histories about Don Julian, the drowned girl, and the legends that had grown around them. They found that the ritual of hanging dolls was not unique to the island, but had roots in ancient Mexican traditions, offerings for protection for the dead, and to appease restless spirits. Despite the investigations, no one found a definitive explanation for the events. Skeptics argued that the moving dolls could be caused by wind, uneven surfaces, or trick photography. But those who had spent hours alone on the island reported a consistent feeling of being watched. Some claimed chills running down their spines, sudden unease, or a compulsion to leave, sensations that could not be replicated off the island. Even scientific studies could not dismiss the eerie nature of the place. Environmental researchers noted unusual growth patterns in the trees, the way water moved in small eddies near the hanging dolls, and the almost unnatural preservation of certain dolls despite years of exposure to sun and rain. Visitors and investigators alike often remarked on the psychological effect of the island. Standing among hundreds of dolls with cracked faces and missing limbs, people reported heightened anxiety, paranoia, and vivid hallucinations. Some felt that the dolls were not merely objects, but sentient observers, silently judging and reacting to their presence. The combination of folklore, tragedy, and unexplained occurrences created an atmosphere that defied easy explanation. The island had become a place where reality and superstition blurred, a living laboratory for fear, grief, and the unknown. Even today, new visitors are drawn by curiosity, leaving behind dolls of their own, contributing to the island's growing population of plastic witnesses. Each new doll is a potential vessel for the restless spirit, a silent participant in the legacy Don Julian left behind, a legacy that remains as enigmatic as the drowned girl who started it all. The modern-day visitors and their encounters. In recent years, La Isla de las Muñecas has become a destination for tourists, photographers, and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. Despite its growing fame, the island has retained its eerie atmosphere, leaving a deep impression on anyone who steps foot among the hundreds of hanging dolls. Visitors today describe experiences that are both unsettling and difficult to explain. Many report a sense of being watched, even when no one else is around. Some swear they feel invisible hands brush against their arms or shoulders. Others say the dolls seem to shift positions, their heads turning to follow movement, their eyes locking onto visitors in a way that feels almost human. One tourist from Canada, visiting in the early 2010s, recalled stepping into a cluster of hanging dolls. She described an overwhelming feeling of sadness, as if the collective sorrow of the island had poured into her mind. It wasn't fear, she said. It was something heavier, like grief had a physical weight. The dolls, they felt alive. Paranormal investigators continue to document strange phenomena. EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, sessions have reportedly captured soft whispers calling names, laughter, and even faint cries. Some say they've captured shadowy figures moving among the trees, disappearing as soon as a camera is raised. Others report that their electronic devices, phones, cameras, GPS units, malfunction when on the island, shutting off unexpectedly, or losing data without explanation. Local guides have their own experiences. Many refuse to stay late or venture into certain parts of the island alone. They speak of dolls that appear to follow them silently, of footsteps echoing behind them when no one else is present. Some visitors even leave small offerings, flowers, candles, notes, to appease what they believe are lingering spirits. A particularly chilling account comes from a group of teenagers who visited in 2018. They claimed that a doll fell from a tree for no apparent reason, striking one of them. Moments later, they all felt a sudden cold breeze pass over them, despite the day being hot and still. One teenager later described seeing a small shadow, shaped like a child, darting between the trees before vanishing entirely. Even photographers are affected. Images often capture anomalies that can't be explained by shadows or light alone. Faint figures, shapes among the dolls, and in some cases, dolls that appear in frames where none have been placed. Many dismiss it as coincidence or pareidolia, but frequent visitors insist the evidence is undeniable. The island continues to draw attention not just for its terrifying beauty, but for the sense of presence that pervades every corner. Visitors often leave with a lingering unease, a feeling that the dolls remember them, that the island itself has recorded their existence. Some believe the spirits of the drowned girl and Don Julian remain tied to the dolls, watching over the place, protecting it from those who come with ill intentions. Others argue that the energy of the island has transformed into something entirely independent, a living, silent entity shaped by decades of grief, devotion, and fear. No matter the interpretation, every visitor leaves changed. Stories multiply, warnings circulate, and La Isla de las Muñecas continues to stand as a monument to tragedy, obsession, and the unknown. The legends and local beliefs. Long before La Isla de las Muñecas became famous, the region of Xochimilco was steeped in stories of spirits, offerings, and a thin line between the living and the dead. For centuries, the canals and islands of this area were considered sacred spaces, places where the boundaries between worlds were fragile. The practice of leaving dolls, offerings, or symbolic objects to appease spirits has roots in ancient Mesoamerican traditions. Local elders say that people once hung effigies or figurines near water to honor those who had passed away or to protect themselves from malevolent spirits. Some historians argue that Don Julian's devotion, though extreme, echoes a ritual that existed long before modern civilization touched the area. But the island's story goes beyond ritual. Locals speak of the drowned girl, whose presence lingers. Some claim her spirit is restless, moving through the dolls, seeking acknowledgement or companionship. Others say that she is protective, keeping visitors from harm, though in strange and often terrifying ways. Legends describe different types of encounters. The Watchers, dolls that seem to follow visitors, warning them of danger. The Crying Child, a voice sometimes heard at dusk, repeating the name of someone who will soon face misfortune if they ignore it. The Offerings, flowers, toys, or notes left by locals and visitors to maintain balance, a silent pact between the living and the dead. Local fishermen and villagers often avoid the canals at night, citing stories passed down for generations. They speak of sudden fogs, strange animal behavior, and whispers that float across the water. Phenomena they attribute to the restless spirits inhabiting the islands. Some visitors believe that each doll carries the energy of someone who has died or someone connected to the island's history. Over the decades, with thousands of dolls now hanging from the trees, the energy has intensified. Paranormal enthusiasts speculate that the combined grief, devotion, and fear of visitors over the years has created a kind of psychic imprint, making the island a living entity in its own right. Anthropologists suggest that the island is more than superstition. They see it as a reflection of human grief and obsession, a physical manifestation of Don Julian's inability to let go of the tragedy that changed his life. To the locals, though, the spirits are real. Many leave offerings, pray quietly, or simply avoid the island, believing that disrespecting it will bring misfortune. Even today, the folklore is alive. Stories circulate online and in guidebooks. Visitors report seeing dolls' heads tilt, hearing faint laughter, and sensing presences that cannot be explained by logic. The island has become a crossroads of history, legend, and fear, a place where reality blends seamlessly with myth and where every visitor, knowingly or not, becomes part of the story. The legends continue to grow with each new visitor, each new doll, each whispered tale. And as long as the island stands, it seems the spirits, both real and imagined, will endure, watching, waiting, and silently reminding the living of the fragility of life, memory, and peace. The scientific perspective and unexplained phenomena. While locals and visitors speak of spirits, curses, and whispered voices, La Isla de las Muñecas has also drawn the attention of scientists, psychologists, and researchers trying to understand the unusual events from a rational standpoint. Environmental scientists first observed that the dolls, many of which are decades old, show anomalous preservation patterns. Despite exposure to sun, rain, and humidity, some dolls appear less degraded than expected. Researchers suggest that the materials used in certain dolls, combined with the island's microclimate, could explain the slow deterioration. Yet the effect is uneven. Some dolls rot quickly, while others remain almost intact, creating a stark and unsettling contrast. Psychologists studying the island emphasize the power of perception and suggestion. The sheer number of dolls, their hollow eyes, cracked faces, and suspended bodies, triggers heightened awareness and anxiety in visitors. In a place filled with silence and shadows, human imagination can exaggerate ordinary movements, sounds, and reflections into something paranormal. A swaying doll or a fallen branch can feel like an intentional movement. Whispers carried by the wind may be perceived as voices calling names. Despite these rational explanations, the island continues to generate experiences that are difficult to dismiss. Visitors report that some dolls seem to change position between visits, with no wind, no animals, and no human interference. Cameras and audio equipment often malfunction inexplicably. Lights flicker, electronic devices shut down, and GPS signals drop in areas where there is no apparent interference. Some researchers propose a phenomenon known as residual energy imprinting. According to this theory, intense human emotion, grief, obsession, fear, can leave subtle traces in the environment. While this remains largely speculative, it may account for the overwhelming sense of presence reported by many visitors. Moreover, the island presents unusual acoustic phenomena. Certain sections of the trees and waterways amplify natural sounds in ways that can mimic whispers or laughter. This, combined with shadows cast by the dolls in sunlight, creates a sensory experience that can easily appear supernatural. Even skeptics admit that La Isla de las Muñecas is unique. While some phenomena can be explained by environment, psychology, and optics, the consistent reports of movement, anomalous behavior of dolls, and strange sensations experienced by visitors remain difficult to fully quantify. The scientific perspective does not deny the cultural or emotional power of the island. Anthropologists argue that the blend of tragedy, obsession, and local belief creates a space where myth and reality merge. Don Julian's life, the drowned girl, and the thousands of dolls together form a psychological and spiritual landscape, one that continues to captivate, terrify, and intrigue all who approach. In the end, the scientific investigation adds layers of complexity to the story. It acknowledges what can be measured while leaving room for the unknown, a fitting reflection of the island itself. Even as cameras record and researchers take notes, the island keeps its secrets. And for many, it is precisely this intersection of the explainable and the inexplicable that makes La Isla de las Muñecas eternally haunting. The legacy and lasting mystery. Today, La Isla de las Muñecas stands as one of the most unusual and haunting places in the world. Visitors come from every corner of the globe, drawn by the stories, the legends, and the unsettling sight of thousands of dolls hanging silently from the trees. The island is now maintained by guides who allow controlled visits, ensuring the delicate ecosystem and the hundreds of dolls remain undisturbed. Yet, despite its increased accessibility, the island retains an air of mystery. The dolls, weathered by decades of sun, rain, and neglect, continue to evoke a sense of awe, fear, and fascination. The legacy of Don Julian Santana Barrera lives on. He devoted his life to the island, driven by grief, devotion, and a desire to protect the spirit of the drowned girl. Even after his death, locals and visitors speak of him in reverent tones, the man who became one with his haunted sanctuary. Some say his spirit lingers among the dolls, still caring for the island, still watching over those who enter. The island has also inspired a broader cultural fascination. Documentaries, books, photographs, and online accounts continue to circulate worldwide, fueling curiosity and speculation. It is often described as a living monument to grief, obsession, and the unexplained, a place where human emotion and tragedy are embedded in the very environment. While some dismiss the island as superstition or psychological projection, the sheer consistency of visitors' experiences, whispered voices, movement of the dolls, unexplained sensations, makes it difficult to fully explain. Skeptics and believers alike are united in their acknowledgement that something about the island defies normal understanding. Local legends continue to evolve. Some say the drowned girl's spirit guides new visitors, warning the unwary. Others believe that each new doll added to the island carries a fragment of energy from its giver, a silent pact between the living and the dead. For those who have visited, the island leaves a lasting impression. Many describe an indescribable feeling, a presence that lingers long after they leave the canals of Xochimilco. They speak of the doll's hollow eyes, of the stillness of the water, and of the weight of history and grief hanging in the air. Ultimately, La Isla de las Muñecas is a place of contrasts, life and death, reality and myth, grief and devotion. It is a reminder that the human need to honor, to protect, and to remember can create spaces that are both beautiful and terrifying. And so, the island endures, a silent witness to tragedy, a guardian of secrets, and a haunting testament to the mysteries that can exist in our world. The dolls hang in the trees, still watching, still waiting, and still keeping the story alive for anyone brave enough to approach. The abandoned island of dolls remains one of the most haunting mysteries of Mexico, a place where the line between life and death, reality and legend, has blurred forever.